Today on In Good Faith, I'm very pleased to be speaking with Cantor Adam Davis. Cantor, thank you for making time today.
Thank you, Steve. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Just 10 months at Salt Lake City's Congregation Kol Ami synagogue, and he served Temple Beth-El of Great Neck in New York, having also done so for communities in California, Illinois, and Maryland, as well as Virginia. Cantor Davis has composed some original songs. We'll be hearing some music today, and some musical settings of Jewish prayers. And Uvchein was a piece of his just recently published in Transcontinental Music Publications' High Holy Days Anthology. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Very cool. He's a graduate of the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music and Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion's Debbie Friedman School of Sacred Music. And prior to pulpit work, Cantor Adam founded Kfar, a Jewish art center in Chicago, which is a leading voice for new Jewish culture there in the Chicago area, doing lots of different events and performances. Would your parents, if I could have talked to them when you were about 8, be surprised where you ended up?
It's a great question, Steve. Probably not.
You weren't singing around the house? Or?
They probably would not be surprised, actually.
Oh, okay.
In fact, I was a very musical child. I loved to sing. Some of my earliest memories were of singing music and performing with my grade school choir, actually. And it was a surprise, or so my mother tells me, when I appeared on stage at my elementary school's winter holiday concert. I had heard over the announcements as a kindergartner that the choir was looking for new singers, and if you wanted to come and join the choir, to show up in the music room after school, which I did. And I didn't realize it, but it was intended for the upper school members, the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and here comes the kindergartner joining the choir. But the music teacher knew well enough to let me sing along, and I auditioned for and got a solo for this concert. And I don't know why, but I didn't tell my parents. I just thought it was something one did. Oh. And so when the curtain pulled back, I was singing the introduction and first verse of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And apparently someone turned to my mother and said, "Oh, you must be very proud to know that he was going to do this." And she said, "I had no idea." But we were a very musical family, and all throughout my childhood, I found opportunities to sing with groups, whether it was through school or through our synagogue, which my family helped to start in suburban Chicago. So music was with me from a very early age.
When did you figure out the connection? And if your family helped start a synagogue, there obviously would have been some prayers and things that were chanted or read or sung. When did you figure out the connection between music and worship, that those went together?
Well, I don't think I ever had an aha moment, because it was so seamless in our tradition. When we would recite the blessings on Friday night together around the table over the wine and the challah, the bread, and the candles, those blessings are always sung. So from a very early age, that was just kind of obvious to me that the two went hand in hand. And as we grew with the congregation and as we grew up, there were more and more chances to do that. There was a junior choir. There was singing together at services. Jewish services, worship is very musical. And I like to think that the innermost essence of our souls, our soul, the word for soul in Hebrew is neshama, and the word for breath is neshima. So that they're the same root word. And so our soul and our breath are so deeply connected. And when we sing, the essence of our soul joins with that of other people's voices and rises to the heavens. And so in my congregation growing up, we always sung, and there was always harmony, and our rabbi had been a cantor previous to his training as a rabbi, and so it was a very musical place. And I loved to harmonize with the cantor and the rabbi and everyone around us, and it never struck me that there was anything else but that prayer could be just words or reading. So it wasn't until I think I was in college and I attended services with my college roommate in Cincinnati, and it was a very different kind of congregation where it was much more frontal, much more presentational, and no one sang. And I was so surprised by that.
And missed it, probably.
Yeah, I wondered where there. It wasn't that there wasn't music; it's just that people weren't singing, and I found that very strange. But there are many forms of prayer, and what I've learned is that singing is its own spiritual practice. The words that we add to them, that's really an enhancement. You know, the Hasidic teachers, the mystics, explain that a melody is its own pure form of prayer, and that any melody can be pure, but to make it holy, you have to strip away the husk, the klipa that we call it, the outer shell of a piece of wheat, to get at the kernel of what it is. And that husk is the words and the associations, and it's in that way that the Hasidim adopted Napoleonic marches or other tunes that they thought were special, and so we can do the same thing. I believe it's, I'm trying to remember who taught it. Someone taught that, and you'll probably be able to tell me who, that when we sing, we pray twice. And so there's the words and there's the music. I always feel like the two things are combined, but there's a practice of wordless singing in Judaism, akin to chanting. It's called nigun, which literally means melody. And just by singing a melody that repeats and harmonizing with people and joining your voices together, you can achieve a certain state of spirituality that you might not otherwise have.
That seems quite beautiful because it can have a slightly different meaning for each person participating because the words aren't directing in one particular direction.
There are no words.
Yeah, because there are no words. It's not making us think of a particular verse or concept. I love what you taught us about. I'm thinking of God breathing the breath of life into Adam, and
the Ruach Elohim, the breath of God.
Yeah, and that tying together with what it means to pray or to sing, because certainly music does to me bring the service to life, at least worship for me, and even that idea of a wordless melody is really intriguing and beautiful. You, in the middle of doing everything else you did, founded a Jewish arts organization, Kfar, which means village. What was the impetus for that? And have you been surprised to see how this has grown to be a really important institution for Jewish life and arts in Chicago?
Thank you. You honor me by even mentioning Kfar. The organization is no longer extant. It was a victim of the stock market crash of 2008.
Oh, so I've been reading, the things I've been reading were all before that.
Yeah. Basically, it ended around 2014, I think.
Why don't I just restate the question?
Yeah.
That'll be better. You're busy with your life, but you also founded an arts organization for Jewish arts. And aside from the music that you do in the synagogue, why was that important?
It was important because even though I was active in synagogue life, and I should say this was prior to my becoming a cantor, I was involved as a layperson in synagogue life. And even though I would serve as what's called a shaliach tzibur, an ambassador of the congregation, a prayer leader,
Mm-hmm.
I was not formal clergy, but I was involved in synagogue life. Like, as I said before, my family helped start a synagogue. I was very active in Jewish life throughout my life. And yet I was very aware, keenly aware, that there were people who were never going to set foot into a synagogue or a temple. It just was not their bag. Either they had some kind of traumatic experience when they were young, or they said, I don't, we have lots of 12-year-old atheists, who say, well, I don't believe in all that gobbledygook and I'm never going back. And yet, in Judaism, there are Jewish atheists, there are Jewish agnostics. People, it might surprise people to learn that maybe only 40 or 50%, less than 50% of Jews in North America affiliate with a synagogue or temple. One can be a Jew in the street and not have a faith association. You can be a cultural Jew. And
that's who you were reaching out to then.
Yeah, there was something that was happening in I'd say the late 90s. It was happening in the big coastal cities, especially New York, where there was a cultural revival happening. There were all kinds of musicians and visual and theater artists who were starting to explore their Jewish identity through their craft. And some of them were drawing on deep reservoirs of spiritual practice. They may have come from a more observant background. Some of them were exploring their cultural identity through klezmer or other forms of music, or even there were Sephardic musicians, Jews from the Spanish and Middle Eastern traditions, who were starting to explore and meld their background, their knowledge, with more modern forms. So you had all these bands performing not in synagogues, but in clubs. There were even some venues that were opening up that were nominally Jewish spaces that were presenting regular mainstream arts and music alongside Jewish arts and music. And that was in New York. There was one specific place called Makor on the Upper West Side. It's actually where Norah Jones got her start. And I remember thinking, I was watching what was happening in New York, and I was working in marketing at the time for, ironically, a liquor company. And I wasn't totally thrilled with that line of work. I was like, what am I doing? I really want to do something to help my people. I really want to do something that's musical, interesting, and can reach the people that I want to reach, and bring them closer to their identity without having to necessarily set foot into a building that they are uncomfortable with. And I was watching what was happening in New York, and I thought, if we could just have a little bit of that here in Chicago, it would be amazing. And then 9/11 happened, and I closed my laptop, and I thought, is this what I want to be doing when the plane hits the building? Metaphorically, for me.
Yeah.
I was watching all that paper fly, and I thought, this is all, it's not important. It's not meaningful. I want to do what's meaningful to me and what I think is going to be meaningful to other people. And so I started this little thing, and it was the summer of, I want to say 2002. I heard about a group that was performing in New York, and they were coming from overseas, and I thought, I wonder if I could divert them to Chicago. Send an email out to all my friends and see who shows up. I was expecting maybe 20 people to show up, but 100 people showed up. It was great, and Kfar was born. And after about 10 years, we had done a couple hundred events, started working with cultural institutions, and it became a temporal community for people who were affiliated with synagogues and the Jewish community, who appreciated the music and the scene, and those who were on the periphery. And they could come together in spaces that felt safe for all of them. And they would look around the room and say, aha, I see my people are here.
So when did you make the jump to I'm going to train as a cantor, and that will help satisfy, I think, part of that need that you're talking about, that meaning making.
Yeah. Well, so the whole episode of Kfar is kind of I guess maybe a part of the winding road, as it were. Many people throughout my life had asked me, up to that point and during that period, when are you going to become a cantor? My childhood rabbi asked me, my childhood cantor asked me, my grandparents would ask me, my camp directors, even my university professor. I studied musical theater in Cincinnati, and my college professor one day said to me, "Don't you think you'd rather be in the cantorate than a life on the stage? It's so much more fulfilling." And I thought he was trying to spook me a little bit, but they were all onto something that I didn't necessarily know about myself. It was kind of like a Moses moment, and I'm no Moses.
Moses says, "But Lord, I'm not the guy.
I'm not the guy." Exactly. You know. I want you to go and speak to the most powerful guy and tell him to let my people go so they can worship me. And he's like, "Who? Me? Like this guy?" Yeah. So yeah, I would always say I don't know that I have the calling. I don't know that I hear the kol damab dekaka, the still small voice, right? I didn't hear the great voice either going, "Adam, you should be a cantor." And I resisted it for so long, even though I loved to sing in synagogue and I loved to sing with my cantor and my rabbi and everything that I did. Fast forward to that financial crisis in 2008, I found myself, as I did sometimes, leading a minyan. A minyan is a Jewish prayer quorum, and I think the cantor of the synagogue was on vacation or something, and so they called me, and I was happy to do it. I did it often, and someone came up to me afterwards, as had become a bit of a pattern, and said, "Cantor, that was lovely." And I said, "Well, I'm not the cantor." And they said, "Right. Well, anyways, there's an opportunity with the Council for Jewish Elderly, which is an organization in Chicago. Now it's called Senior Life. They operate about 14 different residences with different licensures and abilities for seniors. Would you be interested in leading a service on a regular basis?" And I thought to myself, sure, why not? I do it here. And one thing led to another. And soon I was doing this on a weekly basis for several of such residences. And I still was not a cantor, but
at least in name.
Right. I mean, there are many roads to the cantorate. In a century ago, the way you became a cantor was you started in the choir and you apprenticed, and one day the cantor went on vacation and you became the assistant cantor, and then they went to a different town and you got to audition for the role. It was an apprenticeship model. Training seminaries for cantors are only about 100 years old. But I was getting these beautiful senior citizens calling me cantor. It was very hard to correct them. It was they were very insistent. And it was around then that I realized it wasn't the call from on high. It wasn't even the call from within that I needed to respond to. It was the call of my people saying, "You're my cantor." Not long thereafter, a congregation got in touch with me because they were looking for a cantor. Their search fell through. They wanted someone who could sing for the High Holidays and lead services on Shabbat and train the kids for B'nai Mitzvah. "Do you know anybody?" And I said, "I've got a guy. I know someone."
I know a guy.
Right. So and that began the formal journey. But in some ways, we have this notion of lech lecha in Hebrew, which means go forward, go into your going.
Mm-hmm.
It's what God says to Abraham, Lech Lecha, to the land I'll show you. Go out from this place to the unknown. And I had been resisting that. And this was the path that was being shown to me. It just took me a long time to realize, but it took Abraham a long time too. You know, he was older than I am before he set out from Ur. And, you know, the interesting thing is my Jewish name is Avram, which was Abraham's initial name, Avram. It wasn't until later on he added the hey for Avraham. But I feel a kinship with my ancestor, that there's this journey that we all take, and it's never a straight line. Life is circuitous, and just when we think we know where we're going, we get spun around a little bit. There's a curveball, there's an economic crisis, or there's COVID, right? And things change for us, and it's about how we handle our transitions. Life is not just about traveling on mountaintops. It's also about how we get through the valleys.
I'm wondering if, especially in those early years,
Mm-hmm.
working as a cantor, serving as a cantor, if there was a particular section of Torah or a song or something that really you felt connected you with the congregation or with the divine.
That's a great question.
I'm trying not to say, what's your favorite song? Because it's not that kind of a thing.
Right. Well, first of all, you corrected yourself and said working as a cantor, serving as a cantor. But in truth, it's both.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks may not know that in the Jewish community, clergy are professionals.
Yeah.
It's not that way in every community. And you don't necessarily need a rabbi or a cantor in a congregation, but we do train at seminaries for 4 or 5 years, and we're all locally employed. So it's both an avocation and a vocation. So in terms of the music in a song, you know, there's a melody that my childhood rabbi would sing on the High Holidays. And I don't know if it was his, he wrote a lot of music, or if it was a folk melody. There are some melodies that are so, they're so resonant. We call them Mi Sinai. They're old melodies from Sinai. They're not actually from Sinai. They're probably a few hundred years old, which is fairly new in our culture. But they're rooted in the prayer modes, what we call nusach.
Different scales.
Yeah, it's more than scales. Yeah, it's kind of the behavior of the music. It's related to the Middle Eastern makam system, and in Eastern European Ashkenaz, we call it, there are 4 or 5, depending on who you ask, modes that have been preserved. So one of them is from that, and it's a prayer called Shema Kolenu. Shema means hear, and Kolenu, the word kol is voice. And so Kolenu means our voice, or our voices. And frequently, Jewish prayer, especially communal prayer, is spoken in the plural. It's a we. There's certainly individual prayer, but when we sing, like I said before, when we sing, there's something very special. And so the liturgy is often in the plural, because we're asking as a community for our prayers to be heard on high. And that's actually, it's one of the fascinating things for me, that this is a prayer for prayer. It's a prayer to ask that our prayers be heard. And it's...
I love that you said it was from your childhood rabbi.
Yeah. A blessed memory, Ruvain Frankel, very special and lovely guy. Anyone who knows that name knows he was a very a beautiful soul. Made you feel like you're the only person in the room. He taught me Torah. He taught me how to chant. He taught me how to pray, as well as my grandfather. And I also learned from my childhood cantor, Joe Davis, no relation. And Joe was actually a lawyer. He did this for the pure love of it, a true amateur. And Joe and Uvchein would sing this melody, and they would harmonize. And Joe actually later on in life, sadly, developed brain cancer. And he, this is a prayer that we sing on the High Holidays. And it's on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, because the Day of Judgment is arriving, and we read in the liturgy who will be written in the book of life, who will live and who will die, who by fire and who by water. Many people know that Leonard Cohen song. It's based on that same liturgy. And Joe fought an amazing fight and recovered until he didn't. And there was that last High Holidays, and I was there, and everyone knew this song, this melody, would sing, and everyone knew this was the last Yom Kippur they would ever hear Joe do this. And so he was singing this song, and part of it is, the words are, Al tashlichenu li'et zikna, do not throw us away, do not cast us out in our moment of old age, in our time of weakness. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house. I'm misty just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And for him to be singing these words, just in the pureness of his voice, Al tashlichenu li'et zikna, Al tashlichenu li'et zikna. I mean, it was just V'ruach koshecha. It was just amazing, and that particular melody shifted for me in that moment. It always was powerful because everyone knew it and sang it and harmonized, but the words really rang true there. This prayer, Unatana Tokef, that the day of judgment has arrived, and who will live and who will die. It's not about who is worthy. It's about acknowledging our mortality. That we all ultimately have one thing that we're given, and that's time. That's the only thing that we have, is time. And how we use it is the most important thing that we do. We're actually in the middle of a period in Judaism called Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, from the second day of Passover through Shavuot, which begins next Monday, June 1st, I want to say. We count the barley, but it's a cycle of weeks. It's a week of weeks, 49 days, and every evening we count. There's no real rationale for it in Scripture. It's just something we do. And so we've learned that each of these 7 weeks can have a theme. And each of those days within the week also has a theme. And they're an opportunity for personal refinement and for reestablishing relationships that are meaningful as we go from the Exodus, right? From the moment of our liberation, Yetziat Mitzrayim, to the revelation at Sinai. Our people underwent a refinement. And even after Sinai, there was a lot of refining still to do. But we personally and as a community go through that refinement. And so there's all these moments, and Joe taught me this, Joe Davis, my childhood cantor. He said, Adam, every day we have to be thankful. We have to be. That's what we're about as a people. Yehudim means those who are thankful. Yehudah, the name Judah, from which we get Jew, was Leah saying, I am thankful. I will give thanks for this child. And so every day we have, our sages teach, we have an obligation to say Mea Brachot, 100 blessings, which are really just tiny little opportunities to say thank you and to express gratitude for everything from being able to open our eyes in the morning to the food we eat, to the relationships and love we have. And that's the way, that's the path to a life of meaning and sacred living. So those are things I learned along the way. You started by asking me a song, but music can really help us take that journey and help us crack open our souls.
So you just started answering my next question, which is, when you are leading music, whether it's you yourself or everyone is singing as a congregation, what do you see happening? What does the music do to you and to the people there?
Well, there's, I'll start with a teaching, if I can. There's a book called the Tikkun Zohar. It's a commentary on the Kabbalistic teachings. And in it, there's a passage, my friend and teacher, Rabbi Deborah Sachs-Mintz, brought this text to my attention, that there is a palace of tears, and you can only access this palace by crying. And there's a palace of nigun, a palace of song, and you can only access this palace by singing. Also, there's a palace of light, and you can only enter it by studying Torah. But the connection between emotion and song is so intimate, and I think we spend a lot of our time in life walking the streets, building fortresses, as Sting once sang, a fortress around your heart. We build these defenses and put up barricades because we're afraid to show what we feel and that we're vulnerable, right? There's a vulnerability there. But prayer is about vulnerability. We begin our worship with kind of a warm-up act. There's always like kind of spiritual calisthenics before we start the actual formal call to prayer, the Baruch Hu. There's like a whole bunch of other liturgy. And some of that's actually because people show up late. But you want to give people a chance to kind of warm up. And it takes a little bit to kind of open your heart. And you do that through song. And by getting just a little bit more comfortable and singing and feeling like this is safe space and I can think or utter my innermost concerns and prayers in this moment, that's really important. That's the essence of what we're doing. Or if we're studying Torah, as we do on in the mornings, to be able to receive the teachings that we get and internalize them, we have to be open, and we need some time to do that. And so what I'm hoping to do as a prayer leader, as a chazan, is to help people achieve that state of openness and vulnerability. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's enough just to feel like I'm here with my people and I'm good. Or I'm here and I'm helping other people pray or make a minyan so they can say Kaddish. Or I just came because I needed to come for we call it just for Kiddush. That's the meal that happens afterwards when people linger longer. That's, some people just come for Kiddush. But no matter what your reason is, right, you've come because you're feeling something. And my goal is to help people take that next step into that unknown journey in the day, in the week, and take the bricks down for just a little bit and open up and be vulnerable.
Our time's going fast.
Oh.
Maybe a couple of just short musical questions.
Yeah.
I have heard, correct me if I'm wrong, that there are different versions of Shabbat songs that, as the candles are lit, will
Sure.
be sung. Did you have one that was in your home that was the one that was
Yeah,
or were there different ones?
So there are two different ones that I grew up hearing.
Mm-hmm.
One is actually more closely associated with lighting candles for Hanukkah, and then there's another one that I learned later on. But the melodies are not necessarily incongruent or different. They're in the same mode. They're both minor. Actually, no, one's in major. But there's hundreds of melodies for every psalm, for every hymn, for there are commonalities. But
I'm just wondering if you'd share part of one that you knew from the home you grew up in.
one melody that some people are familiar with. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu להדליק נר של Shabbat. So that's a melody, I believe, by Lawrence Avery, maybe, and that's frequently heard in Reform congregations, and one that I grew up hearing sounded more like this: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu להדליק נר של Shabbat. So
Nice.
two
Thank
different
you.
styles, and depending on where you're from in the world, you might hear other melodies.
What percentage would be sung English or Hebrew?
Great question. So the congregation I serve now, Congregation Kol Ami here in Salt Lake City, is dual affiliated. We have an affiliation with the Union for Reform Judaism, which is a reform movement, and then the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism. And there are, it depends on the congregation, but as a general guideline, let's say, Reform congregations tend to include more of the vernacular, a lot more English, or in other parts of the world, German or Russian or Spanish. Conservative congregations also, but more of the prayer would be done in Hebrew. It's our universal language. But most North American Jews are not fluent speakers of Hebrew. We use liturgical Hebrew or Torah Hebrew, Rabbinic Hebrew, which some of my current students who are Israeli, they look at that language and they say, it's like reading Shakespeare. It's just a different style of reading of Hebrew. So we use English pretty liberally, especially when we're doing a Reform style service.
And I wonder, for High Holy Days, I mean, I was going to ask about a song that would relate to that. Obviously, you've had one published. We could ask for that one.
Oh, that's a big one.
or is there something you would typically do for Yom Kippur or one of the other days during that period that you could share a part of?
A part of, yeah. I mean, Uvchein is actually like a 7-minute mini suite, if you will.
Okay.
It's one of the insertions we have for the High Holidays into the normal part of the liturgy that help define the High Holidays. Because one of the themes we have is about sovereignty, Malchuyot, and the three insertions of Uvchein speak of it, and then and here's what happens. So it's a little long. At least my version is a little long. But I'm trying to think of something that I could do that's a little shorter. Well, I certainly could do something that would be fairly well known to almost anyone who set foot into a synagogue. But even people who have never set foot into a synagogue but have attended a concert by the band Fish, the jam band. It's not well known, but the drummer, I think, went to day school, Jewish day school, and so they incorporated a couple of songs, Jewish songs, into their repertoire early on, and this one is one that we think of and sing at the High Holidays. It's called Avinu Malkeinu, our parent, our sovereign, and we acknowledge that our deeds are wanting, but we ask for forgiveness anyways, because we're all capable of repentance and return, and God is eternal in God's granting of that forgiveness. So this is Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'Haneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'Haneinu, ki ein banu ma'asi. Hasei manu tzedakah v'chesed. Hasei manu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'Haneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'Haneinu, ki ein banu ma'asim.
Very pretty, very evocative too.
It's one of those melodies I referred to before as Mi Sinai. We think it's so old that we think of it as coming from the time of Moses. Might have come from the 16th century or so, but that melody or variations on it are so deeply ingrained in our people. You can kind of go anywhere and people will know that.
Maybe two final questions, if you still have time.
Of course. That's
When-
all we have is time.
Okay. When did guitar get incorporated? Was it a cappella, or were there other instruments, or is it just because it's so handy and so portable that it can be part of any service?
Well, we know from the texts that the Levites played instruments in the times of the temple. And following the destruction of the temple, it actually became the practice of Jewish communities not to play instruments on Shabbat or during worship, because it was feared that was too close to temple worship. And because we no longer had the temple, we should be in a state of sort of perpetual mourning and differentiate our worship. And so in traditional congregations, Orthodox and conservative, there was really not a tradition of playing music as part of Shabbat worship. That really began to change in the 1800s with the Enlightenment and the what we call Haskalah, when German Jews became citizens of the state on equal footing. Many decided we should be more like our neighbors, and so the vernacular started to be used for sermons. The cacophonous sort of strange rhythm of the service that was both communal but individual got more organized and formalized, and there would be a formal start time. There was less liturgy, and that was all fine and good until someone introduced the organ. And that was the last straw for some people. But that movement, which became Reform Judaism, began to embrace more musicianship throughout worship as it evolved in the 19th, 20th, and now 21st centuries. The guitar we saw really take root in the
Sephardic?
Well, the Sephardim would have used the oud, the lute, and they wouldn't have used it in worship settings, but they would have used it to accompany what are called piyutim, liturgical poems. During the Muslim rule of Spain, the caliphs would employ court poets and musicians, and from that evolved a very highly stylized form and rhetoric of Arabic poetry, which the Jewish community mirrored. And actually they preserved that tradition, and the rhythms and the meter would be accompanied by a certain maqam, I used that word before, which are easily playable on the microtones of a fretless instrument like the oud. Yeah. But guitar probably did not come into heavy use, especially in prayer, until about the 1960s. There began
that sounds about right.
Right, I mean it does, doesn't it? There began a revival, a Jewish revival at that point in time. It was about a generation removed from the Holocaust, and in conjunction with the folk movement that happened at the time, people started investigating their own cultural identities, religious identities, and you had people like Debbie Friedman, who started to write new music that wasn't necessarily in the mode of traditional worship, but more in the mode of the time. Concurrently, you had people like Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, who was a little bit more in the Hasidic realm, went out to San Francisco at the insistence of the Lubavitcher Rebbe at the time, and founded the House of Prayer and Light in Haight-Ashbury, and began writing neo-Hasidic music, which, even though it wasn't used with guitar in worship, became adopted by many people as a kind of a new form of singing. So we didn't see guitar really take hold in services, I think, until probably the 70s and 80s. It took a minute. Even in some Reform congregations, that was viewed as like not what we do, right? Organ, piano, guitar, it's a little too informal. But now it's very common in congregations of all sorts. Even in Orthodox congregations, not on Shabbat, you'll find guitar.
So, if you've seen The Jazz Singer with Neil Diamond, and of all people, Laurence Olivier,
yes,
you know what a cantor is. But for people who don't, how would you describe that when people ask what you do?
A cantor, as you might infer, is a singer. But more than that, the role of the cantor is to lead the congregation in prayer and in song. The Talmud teaches that before a congregation even hires a rabbi, they should hire a cantor. That's just a little professional plug. But the role of the cantor is one of music and spirituality, working with the children to train them as they become ready for their bar and bat mitzvah. That's a very traditional kind of view of what a cantor does. These days, the modern cantor is full clergy in partnership with rabbis. We do life cycle events, we do pastoral care, we sometimes do counseling, we do weddings and funerals. It's really kind of a full portfolio programming. I used to have the 7 Ps, performance, pedagogy, pulpit work, pastoral care, and now we would include production. I think there was a couple more, but it's a full-time
Press
role.
release.
Press releases, we do that too.
Okay.
Interestingly, the word in Hebrew that we sometimes hear for cantor is chazan. Chazan is related to the word chazon, which means vision. And the role traditionally of the chazan would be to paint the text in such a way that even if you didn't really know exactly what the words were, you get a sense of what was happening in the prayer, and also know, based on the nusach being used, what time of day it was and what time of year it was, because there are specific modes and melodies for each time of year. And so the chazan would be the preserver of that tradition and help lead the congregation in the daily life of its worship.
Thank you. Cantor Adam Davis, this is really fascinating. I've learned a lot from you. You are new in your post, not quite a year yet. Congratulations on that. The congregation, I'm sure, is glad to have you. And I'm wondering, you talked about this range of belief. Over time, you've lived long enough to that I can ask you what you know about the idea of the divine now that you didn't when you were in your teens.
We think of the divine in different ways throughout the stages of our lives. And even in some of the liturgy that I grew up reading, we would talk about the kisei, the throne, and we have visions of what the divine might appear like. Maybe it's an old beardy guy with, a crown. And yet, in our tradition, we're taught that such imagery is not what the divine is. So we kind of get caught up in these humanizations of the divine, because that's how we understand the world, is through our own experiences. But I've come to appreciate that the divine is what holds this universe together. The divine is what flows between us. The divine is what we all share. All of us, all of creation, has the spark of the divine in it. Even inanimate objects. When we wake up every morning, we have the great privilege of looking up and seeing the mountains, and knowing that mountain has been here for millions of years and has in it part of God, it's a great reminder. And as it goes, as we are supposed to care for God's creation, we also have to care for one another. And so the essential piece of holiness, of kedusha, is what we have between each other, and how we maintain respect for one another, and not just in terms of different peoples and different cultures and religions and ethnicities, but what Martin Buber called the I and the thou. That there's something very sacred and special about the personal relationship we cultivate with one other person. And so that to me is like the essence of divinity. When I spoke about the neshima, the breath, right? There's something very special and unifying about joining our voices together. that is that's kind of the two ideas meeting. That we are distinct individuals, but ultimately, it's that what's inside is the same. We all share these things, and when it gets mixed up into the atmosphere and then rises beyond the atmosphere into the heavens, God can distinguish our souls, but our soulfulness, that's indistinguishable. That's the divine to me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Steve. I really enjoyed this. This is a great pleasure.